Welcome to Player Profiler's weekly Dynasty AMA. I'm Theo Gremminger, and today I'm joined by Dario Offstein, our head of analytics, and Josh Larky, our head of very cool tweets and also cool fantasy content. Guys, we're broadcasting this one live from Detroit. We had an unbelievable stream last night for the NFL Draft Day 1. We're about to do it again in a few hours for Day 2. But before we do that, we're taking your questions. You can get your questions answered in two ways. You can drop them in the YouTube chat, or you can drop them on Reddit. Our friends at Dynasty Reddit have been having us host weekly Dynasty AMAs. I've done one with Josh Larky. I've done a few with Dario. And today we're all doing it together. How are you guys doing today? Are you a little tired?
Not at all.
Not at all? You're juiced up. Okay, I'm a little tired. It was a late night in the Roto Underworld, but we crushed it. A lot of fun. The house is loaded. We got the Podfather in the house. I'm looking right at Cody Carpentier and Memphis Young. They're looking at Day 2 prospects, trying to figure it out, and we're trying to figure it out. Josh, how are you doing?
You know, it's not every day that I have the privilege of covering football until 3:30 in the morning. I feel great right now. Well rested. Let's answer some questions.
Oh, first question in the YouTube chat. Did you guys eat Detroit-style pizza as a group last night? From Henry Siegel. Henry is my son's name, so we're going Henry first. Henry, we did not get Detroit-style pizza. We had pizza at one point on this trip, but it was nothing Detroit-style. I've had Detroit-style pizza. I think it's a nice style, but we did not do it. Maybe we're going to get that done before we leave Detroit. Derek Lincoln, good morning. Good morning to you as well, Derek. Shout out to the Hairy Snowman. He's in the chat. Okay, so let's start out with a question from Sugar Dunkerton, and this is a fun one. What are your preferred landing spots for the remaining wide receivers, and where do you think they'll actually land? So I'll take the preferred, and Dario, you can go with the actual.
Thanks.
Because the preferred is really fun. You have the Buffalo Bills picking at, with the number 1 pick in the second round. If the Buffalo Bills don't draft a wide receiver, we may start a riot. And then we also have the Los Angeles Chargers picking at 37. If the right wide receiver falls to Los Angeles, that's like a dream. Like if Ladd McConkey is drafted at 37 overall to Los Angeles Chargers, wheels up. Dario, where are you at? Or where are you at for this one?
I think that the Patriots are also a good landing spot in terms of one of these guys being able to get a lot of targets. They have the second pick here in this round. The Raiders, not as exciting, but I feel like they're a team that kind of just could use that depth. So in terms of boring landing spots, I think 44, 45, you got the Raiders and the Saints back-to-back. That could get ugly and nuke the value of someone that we really like. The Bengals at 49, I mean, we know that they like Josivas as a T. Higgins replacement, but he's a late-round pick. I think if they invest that capital in someone to take someone in the second round today, that's pretty exciting. I'm really excited to see where Keon Coleman lands specifically. I think he has the upside that if he lands with a good quarterback and a good offensive scheme, he could really hit. And he's someone that, Keon Coleman on the Panthers, for example, would just be absolutely dreadful.
Okay, so I'll throw out one spot that's actually really good, a slide spot, where we'd love to see some of these guys drafted inside the top 40. But Josh, if Pittsburgh drafts somebody at 51 overall, that's exciting because they've had such hit rates with second-round wide receivers over the years, whether it's George Pickens. They're a franchise we kind of trust when they evaluate the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I think we might be a little bit timid for this season since it's Russell Wilson and a new offense. We kind of know where his career trajectory has gone. But like you said, when you start to zoom out and you look at the history of these Steelers receivers, significantly more hits than misses.
Read it from here.
We take more questions.
Yeah, go ahead, finish yours.
In terms of some landing spots that I expect, I think the guy I'm looking at is Ladd McConkey. At this point, he profiles like the best target earner remaining on the board. If you just stare at his aggregate production from college and go, oh, this guy actually doesn't have very many receptions, very many receiving yards, you're missing the way that Georgia was rotating their receivers. You're missing all the injuries that he dealt with. Anytime he was actually on the field, as in on the field of play, he was getting targeted at a ridiculous route, his yards per route run, a lot of the advanced metrics that we generally like to look at Player Profiler, McConkey was succeeding. I think at this point, he either goes to the Patriots with the third pick of round 2, and at worst falls to the Chargers with the 5th pick of round 2. I think right now we're looking at some juicy landing spots for him where my concern was that he would end up with the Panthers. And I think now that the Panthers attach themselves to Xavier Legette, I don't think the Bills take McConkey. I don't think that's a bad pick. McConkey does have about a 30-40% of his experience lining up outside, but I do think they're going to go with a bigger body like A.D. Mitchell. So McConkey for me is the one that I could see trying to find a way to sneak him into my dynasty rookie draft first round if he hits the Patriots and especially if he hits the Chargers.
I mean, I think there's several paths for McConkey to hit our dynasty first rounds. You brought up the Chargers spot, the Buffalo spot, the Pittsburgh spot. I think would be incredible. Would be very, very advantageous for him to be kind of fast tracked in that wide receiver 2 spot. Dario, I want to kick this one to you, and we don't need an exact target here. Maybe you could give a estimated target share. Deontay Johnson. Last night we saw Carolina make that short trade up to get Xavier Legette. Definitely a not an overlapping skill set with Deontay Johnson, but anytime you add a wide receiver in the first round and you make the move to go up and get him, it says something. What does this do to Deontay Johnson, or does it do nothing?
It did very little. So I took about 8 targets off of Deontay Johnson's projection. He was at a 141. Now he's at 133. I think that's still, I'm shooting for that median outcome. He could still come in way ahead of that. We know Deontay Johnson's a big time target earner. Wouldn't be surprised to see him end up somewhere above 150. But the big hit really, this knocked down Jonathan Mingo about 10 targets. And then, there was DJ Chark was still lingering as a free agent to possibly return to Carolina. That's looking much more out of the picture. Also took about 7 or 8 targets away from Adam Thielen to make it happen. But I think it's not a crazy hit to Deontay Johnson. Like you said, there's not too much role overlap. I think that they'll be on the field together, and Deontay Johnson shouldn't struggle to earn more targets than Xavier Legette, but it's going to be something of a hit. Like you said, it's another receiver that they've invested draft capital in.
I still think the possibility for Deontay Johnson to be less sexy Amon-Ra St. Brown for 2024 is on the table. Legette, what is it? He had 167 receiving yards as his highest total through 4 years in college. People are like, oh, like his backstory. I think he's an incredible story. I think he's an incredible person. He's clearly dealt with a lot. Great with dealing with adversity. Great with persevering. Still, though, numbers don't lie. And he is going to be a major, major outlier if he not only hits in a big way in his NFL career, but comes out the gate running. And people might be like, oh, but did you see last season? Yes. What I saw is a player who took 4 years in his current environment and then needed to be in year 5 when, year 2, year 3, year 4, he's already bigger, he's already older, he's already faster, stronger than his competition. It took him till his 5th year to truly dominate. The NFL is essentially the athletes of the athletes. So if it took him that long in college, I don't expect him to very immediately contribute in the NFL in a big way. Not that he won't be starting or that he won't see the field, but I'm a little bit concerned with how he's going to earn targets outside of those scheme touches. Deontay Johnson just has a fantastic target earning profile. We all know, anyone that watched a Carolina game last year, the way that the receivers struggle to separate within the first 3 to 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, that's what Deontay Johnson does better than maybe all but 6 or 7 receivers in the NFL, if we're being honest. If we just leave out his hands, the concentration drops. This is someone who separates and gets open immediately. And I think we should still actually be very, very bullish at the very least on what his target ceiling is.
Yeah.
So I'd say my non-scientific guess would be, we've seen Deontay Johnson go over like 145 like 3 times. Quality of the offense and also a little bit of competition for targets. I'll say he's a 130 target guy. The one thing I'll say about Deontay Johnson is we haven't seen a wide receiver leave Pittsburgh and have like a bunch of success. Like whether it's usually when Pittsburgh moves on from somebody, they do not see their similar success that they saw under that stable organization with Mike Tomlin. They've been pretty strong with that. Chase Claypool, you talk about Antonio Brown, you go down the list, even Le'Veon Bell. Like when they move on from a skill position player, it usually doesn't make them look bad. Let's take one more question from YouTube before we drop into Reddit. Derek Lincoln in the chat. Who are you guys drafting at the 102 in a fantasy super flex tight end premium league like our friends at the FFPC? For me, no question, I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr. at the 102. He is the highest drafted wide receiver since 2015 at the 104. At 104 is where AJ Green was drafted. And the last time we saw a wide receiver of this magnitude picked up by the Arizona Cardinals, it was the DeAndre Hopkins acquisition from Houston. D-Hops in his first year with Kyler Murray finishes as wide receiver 4 overall. I think we could see that same kind of production for Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr., if you had to pick 10 guys, Dario, that could finish wide receiver 1 overall this year, you realistically would have to have Marvin Harrison Jr. in that conversation.
That's an interesting thought experiment because you still have the rookie factor, but I think that he's definitely up there, and I agree with you that he's the correct 102 in a super flex league. I think Jaden Daniels is the guy that you'd bring up as a counterpoint, but if I lived in a world where I had a portfolio of 10 102s, I'm probably taking Marv 8 out of those 10 times.
Josh Larky, explain. Go into the dynasty game theory of why I need to go quarterback over one of the best wide receiver prospects in a long time.
So the way that I would interpret this question is it seems like whoever out there is asking this wants to trade into the 102 or has the 102. If you have the 102 in FFPC leagues, I would recommend trading back to the 103 or 104. And the reasoning for that is I don't think there's a fundamental difference right now between Harrison, between Malik Neighbors, and then between Jaden Daniels. And the way that I'm seeing it is that in year 1, I am most confident in Neighbors in terms of commanding targets in the offense because there's nothing in New York. I like Kyler Murray as a quarterback. I do think Trey McBride has an outside chance to out-target Marvin Harrison. I would be absolutely mind-blown if Wan'Dale Robinson or Darius Slayton shows up, or Jalen Hyatt, and out-targets Malik Neighbors. And then with Jaden Daniels, we have one of the most prolific rushing quarterbacks who has a reasonably good arm and is actually in not half bad of a landing spot. The Commanders' offense actually has some weapons. We've got Terry McLaurin. Jahan Dotson had a pretty good rookie year before taking a step back last year. We've got Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson in the backfield. Even Zach Ertz is there as a security blanket. So the way that I would look at it is Neighbors probably has the clearest path to target floor as a rookie. Marvin Harrison Jr. has the clear best long-term landing spot, being with Kyler Murray and an offense that just has a tight end. And then Jaden Daniels is a quarterback with mobility. And we see that even in catastrophic situations with these quarterbacks, we want to think game theory of what can happen. All right, folks, I hate to do this, but what if Jaden Daniels gets hurt in week 2? And then he gets hurt
Washington
again in week 4.
Fans have already seen their former Heisman Trophy winner get hurt. Don't put that out there, Josh.
And then he gets hurt in week 2, in week 4, and he gets hurt again in week 5 and never plays again the rest of the season. He would still be a top 6 dynasty quarterback. That's what happened to Anthony Richardson last year. We have to think about how insulated someone like Jaden Daniels is for dynasty. So that's kind of why I think that's a flat tier where you go Caleb at 1, you don't overthink it. And then 102, 103, 104, I could see any order of those guys having the most value after the first month of the NFL season.
So I agree with you that Malik Neighbors is a fantastic value. I just think that for me, it's the quality of the offense is going to be higher in Arizona.
Yes.
I think there's going to be more opportunities for Marvin Harrison Jr. to get into the red zone. And one of the greatest drivers still of fantasy scoring is touchdowns. And I think that Marvin Harrison Jr.'s touchdown ceiling this year certainly pushes him up there. Malik Neighbors, we can paint another picture. Dario, the last time we saw Brian Dable acquire a high-end wide receiver, Stephon Diggs was targeted 160 times. There's no real threat out of the backfield to have some unbelievable volume year. Devin Singletary is what he is, and there's a complete lack of target competition. Malik Neighbors, where are you projecting him about in our wide receiver rankings right now?
In terms of our redraft wide receiver rankings, you just can't completely set aside the worries about the volume and the efficiency of the passing game for the Giants. We have him at wide receiver 25. No, 23.
Oh my gosh. Incredibly low. The wide receiver 23 for Malik Neighbors. Dario, we're going to keep this covered. We might have an emergency podcast.
No, we're not.
Week. Malik Neighbors, if Malik Neighbors
Bradley
finishes,
Stalder had him as wide receiver 35.
okay, so I'm going to say that Malik Neighbors in your redraft leagues should be a 3rd round pick.
Well,
Very few players have this sort of upside and target ceilings as rookies. Let's get back to that one, but let's keep taking the question, Josh.
I was going to say quickly I think there's a difference sometimes with the rookies in terms of projections versus where we draft them. Rookies should generally, especially at receiver, be overdrafted compared to the projections because we know that if injuries happen on the team, they can accelerate. And we also know that, and I've written about many articles about this, including some for Player Profiler, about how rookie receivers get better as the season goes along. And that as fantasy points become more important to winning your championship, their production's backloaded.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The only asset class that you can guarantee better production in the second half, and that's extremely valuable in fantasy drafts.
There we go.
Okay. If Malik Neighbors finishes, what did you say, Dario? Dario has him 23. And where did Bradley have him?
35.
Okay, so let's put that slap in the middle. Let's say wide receiver 29, okay? We'll go do a combination of
Total
you and
fantasy
Bradley.
points on the season. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so wide receiver 29, total fantasy points in the season. If he finishes at below wide receiver 29, I'm going to get a custom-made Offstein jersey to wear next year on our Player Profiler draft stream. Malik Neighbors is the man. Here's a question in the chat. I think it's an interesting one. And this is one that we'll have a better picture of after tonight. The 202 in non-superflex or Deontay Johnson. So we're talking about single QB values. 202 is a little bit less, but we're still going to have some players that we're going to really want to draft right there. Without knowing the landing spots for a lot of the players that we're projecting to be in that range, would you take Deontay Johnson or the 202?
My gut is telling me take the 202. You're probably going to have maybe Ricky Pearsall falls there, Lad McConkey, some of these exciting receivers that might not give you the production benefit this year. I mean, again, Dynasty's very win now, rebuild context important, but if you draft a receiver at that 202, the value that they're going to hold compared to Deontay Johnson, I'm leaning toward saying hold that pick.
I'm taking the 202 over Deontay Johnson. I mean, I think that you want the potential of the ascending asset. You want, you take a little bit more risk always when you take the unknown. But I feel like I have a good chance of that. Whoever I'm selecting there being worth a lot more than Deontay Johnson in just a few months. Josh Larky, which way are you going, Deontay Johnson or the 202 in single QB leagues?
I would take Deontay Johnson. I think it's crazy. He turns 28 this summer. We've got 3 years left in the prime at least. All we've seen from him is that he earns targets at a high rate. He has a relatively immobile quarterback. He still doesn't have that much target competition. I'm still not convinced that Xavier Legette is this guaranteed sure thing. They've got nothing at tight end. They've got nothing at running back. It's pretty much just him, the Adam Thielen in his mid-30s. So I'm still pretty bullish on Deontay. I think the contracts that he's gotten throughout his career sort of indicate teams don't view him as the 3rd round pick that he once was. They view him as an elite target earner. And I like elite target earners on my fantasy team. I certainly hope someone like a Ricky Pearsall, like a Lad McConkey can do it. One thing we know for sure is that Deontay's done it, and we should be getting, if he stays healthy, at least 2 more seasons of that elite target earning potential. So even if I start to like one of the rookies, I have at least 1 season to get out from Deontay where you can sell him and the person buying him knows that they're still getting really, really strong production out of him.
Not in my league, bro.
Yeah, I think getting an early second for Deontay Johnson next offseason is going to sound insane.
Yes, it's gonna sound insane next summer. Deontay Johnson, who's coming
Adam Thielen just had over 100 catches and 1,000 yards with Bryce Young, and he's cooked.
Yeah,
he's cooked,
guys. So it's 2-1. Dario and I win.
2-1.
You should accept the 202. A question from Brett in our YouTube chat. Interesting one. With the landing spot for Brock Bowers, drafted 13th overall to the Las Vegas Raiders, would you trade back from the 106 in Superflex 12-team tight end premium? Okay, so this is interesting. So we're going to project the top 4. We all are in agreement of the top 4. Daniels,
Mhm.
Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., and of course Caleb Williams. The 105, Dario, just quick around the horn. You're 105 in Superflex right now.
I think it would be May.
For me, it's May as well. Josh Larky, who are you on?
I would lean Drake May, but I could be talked into McCarthy.
Sure. So we're all in agreement on May. And so 106, we're talking about Brock Bowers, and also we have the tight end premium. I will say this. I sometimes get a little bit chippy around Billy Muzio, Bradley Stalder, and Dario right after the draft because they have their projections, and I always want a little bit more out of the rookie wide receivers. But I was extremely excited to hear that Dario is projecting Brock Bowers as tight end 8 after this landing spot. And I think, Brett, I am still absolutely taking Brock Bowers at the 106. I know I play a lot of FFPC tight end premium Dynasty, and Brock Bowers is pretty much insulated there. This is a landing spot that I'm very, very excited about. Before I talk about Bowers and why I'm excited about this pick, let me kick it to Dario. What would you do here, game theory wise? 106, or maybe trade back for a quarterback or a Worthy? Where are you at?
I think you could trade back. I mean, Josh mentioned JJ McCarthy as the other name in consideration at the 105. I think Rome Odunze is a very solid pick here at the 106. So right there, you've got 2 more names that aren't Bowers that could be floated in this area. If someone I think if your league is viewing this as a negative landing spot and you can still get Bowers at the 108 or Odunze at the 108, I mean, I think that, I mean, I'm generally a fan of always trading down in every context.
So this is a, to Josh's argument sort of with the Jaden Daniels in Superflex. In the tight end premium, if you're projecting Brock Bowers to be that sort of production as a rookie, then his trade value is insulated to a point that he's going to be worth exponentially more than even like a top 10 wide receiver. Now you get to the God tier wide receiver, the top 5-ish kind of guys, that's fine. But if you look at some of the trades coming in right now for the Sam Laportas, the Trey McBrides, those kind of players, if Bowers hits a tight end 8 overall season,
how many quarterbacks in a super flex league right now would you take over Laporta?
That's an interesting one. I'd have to go down the list, but in a FFPC tight end premium
Like
startup,
12? Yeah,
in a tight end, but in a tight end premium startup FFPC league, like a triflex or a superflex, Laporta's going to be a second round pick. In that format, that's where he's going.
Yeah,
So
that's true. He probably goes after like 7, 8 quarterbacks.
Yeah. So he's like, when you get past like when you look past like the Herbert tier, then people are starting to think I'm going to take tight end 1 overall. So tight end premium is a little bit different. I would still take Bowers. Josh, we both answered this one. Dario would consider trading back. Which way would you go?
Yeah, I think I'm always going to try to trade back. If you can't trade back and you're just stuck at the 106, I think I'd say McCarthy is the safest option, just given this landing spot and how we know that TJ Hawkinson's returning from the ACL injury soon. So you kind of have at least a few weeks of value insulation with whatever happens. I'd say Bowers kind of has the ceiling to break fantasy in that format where
right.
If you knew that you were getting essentially like more athletic Travis Kelce, you'd go absolutely bonkers if you could get 7, 8, 9, 10 years of that. And then I'd say that Drake May has a very interesting ceiling case where if he can survive year 1, wheels up. I just worry about if he survives year 1. And I think not the tight end Bowers. I actually think May in some cases would be the lowest floor pick there.
Yeah.
So I'm still sorting out my rankings, but that's kind of how I would view these guys in terms of zooming out slightly and what's this profile look like.
So let's kick this one back to Dario. Dario, this is Ben Peterson in the chat. This was sort of a follow-up to the question we had earlier with the Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and all that in the 102. So let's say that let's take Drake May out of this equation because we all had him at the 105. So right now, if we're ranking 106 through 110 in Superflex, knowing these landing spots, which way are you going with Bowers, Odunze, Xavier Worthy, JJ McCarthy, and Brian Thomas Jr.? So sort of rank those players. Remove Drake May out of the Ben Peterson question and just rank.
I mean, if I was just gut feel right. And again, this is, the draft
Rookie-
happened
rookie
12
draft.
hours ago.
Yeah, rookie draft.
You
Your
know,
gut. This is not our
yeah.
final rankings. You're not being held to
I'm
this.
leaning. I would go McCarthy, Odunze, and then because May's out of the picture, and then Bowers, and then Worthy, and then Thomas.
Okay, so for me, I'm gonna stick with I'm assuming this is a tight end premium. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ben. He says it is super flex tight end premium. So I'm gonna go with Bowers at the 106. I'm gonna go with McCarthy at the 107. I'm gonna go with Odunze at the 108. But I don't have a problem going Odunze ahead of McCarthy if I'm set at quarterback. I'll just say that. Then Xavier Worthy to me is the clear 109. I'm ecstatic about the landing spot. And then in this particular case, I'm going Brian Thomas at the 110. I'll say I don't think Brian Thomas will stick at the 110 after tonight. I think that there's a chance that, and go ahead, Dario.
Whichever running back lands in Dallas, right? We're probably drafting ahead of Brian Thomas in Dynasty leagues.
Much like the Buffalo Bills drafting a wide receiver. If Dallas does not draft a running back tonight, Dario and I are going to riot in downtown Detroit. Josh, finish your rankings here. So you take the same question here. I'll start you off. You already had JJ McCarthy, so I'll say Drake May at the 105, McCarthy the 106 for you, correct?
Yeah, I think right now I'd go May 105, still just based on the profile, but I'm getting nervous. McCarthy 106, Bowers 107, and
Rome
Odunze.
Yeah, and then thank you. I was Rome 108, and the reasoning for that is simply that Rome Odunze is probably not going to produce much this year. Cool. I think the other three ahead of him have more paths to produce more this year. I do like that Rome can be an ascending asset where you go, Keenan Allen might not be there, but there's still a chance Keenan Allen resigns or is extended. I don't really want to take that risk when I know for sure that May, McCarthy, Bowers are going to be getting incredible usage right out of the gate.
I think that's fair. I do think there's a chance.
Same tier though.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that like at the end of the day, Odunze to me becomes sort of a value in these Superflex rookie drafts because Dario, we loved the profile and we still love the profile. We are ecstatic about the draft capital. You talk about top 10 overall NFL draft capital. You see some absolute superstars come out of that range. 109 actually has been sort of a bust pick. That's where John Ross was selected. Mm-hmm. That's where Ted Ginn was selected. Odunze is certainly not going to get punished for those guys. We'll take it like in a top 10 context, but there's a little bit of parallels to CeeDee Lamb being drafted into a somewhat crowded wide receiver room. And Amari Cooper had him boxed out for wide receiver 1 by many in the Dynasty community. CeeDee Lamb ends up outscoring Amari Cooper over the second half of the season. To me, Rome Odunze becomes sort of a value. Now, the flip side is it's the fear. The Jackson Smith and Jigba boxed out of target totals, doesn't gain any value, loses some value his first year in the league in Dynasty. Where are you at? Are you with me or are you at a little bit of trepidation here?
I mean, I think with you is a pretty middle of the road stance, it sounds like. I think that my worry with the Bears right now is Shane Waldron's calling the shots there, and he never ran a fast-paced offense in Seattle. So that, yeah, exactly. As Matt Babbage,
but Matt Babbage, don't.
I've been
Shane. This is a new Shane Waldron. Oh, he's got his swagger back. He's got Caleb Williams. He is the best wide receiver trio in the entire NFL.
If there's one thing we can bet on, it's Theo being delusional about rookies.
Well, my track record on rookies, we got a lot of receipts in the Roto Underworld, Dario. We can go with the Dalton Kincaid, Laporta, Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs receipts from last year's draft, or we can talk about my enthusiasm for Jackson Smith and Jigba. 80% everyone, 80%.
60% of the time it works every time.
It's right all the time. If we look at Waldron, in 2 of his 3 years as offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, they were a top 14 or better scoring offense. Yes, the pace wasn't always there. The yardage wasn't always there, but we got the touchdowns. So I think it's at least reasonable to expect that this will be a functional offense at the very least.
Yeah. Big time. I think the X factor with Chicago is weather, but besides the weather factor, you have to rank them. Like we're talking about 2 wide receivers that were top 8 scorers at the wide receiver position last year in PPR scoring. They had the tight end 8. They go out and get DeAndre Swift. I mean, it's a great offense. So, guys, let's keep this going. Let's actually, you guys can talk it out. I'm going to take it back to Reddit. I'm find our next one. Oh, here's an interesting one off Reddit we didn't talk about, and I saw we all answered this. When do you think is the best time to have your Dynasty rookie drafts? And when are your usual Dynasty rookie drafts? Start with you, Dario.
I think that giving people a week to really like process, react, see, kind of just take in all the information that comes from the draft. Like you said, I mean, you said Saturday after makes sense. I think giving people the Monday, that same week after, just depends on, are we doing slow draft? Just that would be my answer.
Yeah, for me, it's I love the our friends at the FFPC. Every single one of those FFPC leagues starts on Saturday, and they stagger the start times. So if you're in multiple leagues, you might have a draft starting at 9 in the morning and a draft starting at like 6 p.m. like a huge stagger, but they're all starting on that Saturday. I think that gives us enough time to sort of like recalibrate everything, make appropriate decisions. I know some leagues have gone to the pre-NFL draft rookie drafts. That's wild. That's anarchy.
That's sharp.
Where are you at, Josh?
I like a mix. I have some leagues where it's before the NFL draft, and I think that's kind of exciting because you have to really look at what you think the projected draft capital is. And then you have to weigh the landing spots you think are realistic, and you have to kind of weight how many of them do I think are good, how many of them do I think are bad. So I think in that sense, it's very, very fun. I do agree. It can be a little bit of the anarchy feel to it. So I like to have some then and then some after. And the way that I always say it is, if you are willing to wait until after the NFL draft, you have gone through all of prospecting season, you have still held out, give yourself at least a week after the NFL draft before your rookie draft. Because if you've waited that long, you might as well give everyone a little more time to process these picks, since there's so much information that we get hit with. I mean, we got hit with so much last night, and that's 1/7 essentially of the NFL draft. Well, actually less if you start bringing the comp picks. So
but it's
give
more, and if you think about the weighted impact of the picks in each round for fantasy.
Guys, I want to pivot this over. I want to talk about prediction for running backs tonight.
Ooh, boy.
And I'm gonna kick it over to Josh, who actually, Josh, congratulations. You did very, very well in with your rookie draft. So we're gonna kick it over to you, and we're gonna put a little pressure on you for round 2. Okay, you are Mr. Betting Markets. Mm-hmm. Where are the betting markets projecting the first running back to go off the board this evening?
So right now, it seems like the first, if I had to say the most likely running back to go first, Jonathan Brooks. Most likely landing spot would be the Cowboys in round 2. I think a lot can happen here just because teams are inherently unpredictable. We know that the Cowboys do need a running back, but then we could say, well, so do the Chargers. The Bills could use a running back. The Texans could use a running back. There's so many teams out there that could actually, quote unquote, use a running back. And then we also know every single year that teams that we don't even think need a running back take one. Think about the past couple of years with the Seahawks. They take Kenneth Walker in round 2, and then they double down the next year and they take Zach Charbonnet in round 2. So I'd say most likely Jonathan Brooks round 2. I think overall, because we're getting round 2 and round 3, I would expect Jonathan Brooks to go off the board, Blake Corum to go off the board. Right now, Chargers and Giants are the betting market's favorite spots for him, either reuniting with Jim Harbaugh or essentially blocking Devin Singletary. And then we've got Jalen Wright and Trey Benson as the other two that most likely go off the board tonight.
Yeah, I think that there's a few of, like, you bring up the Giants at 47. I think that's an underrated bet for the first running back to go off the board, sort of leaning into what they did with the Neighbors selection, get some offensive skill position players there. They've been linked to Jonathan Brooks. Mm-hmm. I think that would be an interesting one. Dario, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking about the running backs that we hope to see drafted today. I mean, we know from a dynasty perspective, getting that day 2 capital is a huge difference compared to landing on day 3, even if you're a 4th round pick and you land in the absolute perfect spot like we saw last year with Roschon Johnson. that we thought was going to be the best opportunity he could possibly have. We still got nothing from him his rookie year, and then they proceeded to sign DeAndre Swift the following offseason. So getting even that third round capital is such a big difference maker for these running backs. So guys like Marshawn Lloyd, I know that Ray Davis has been a name that's been floated around. I think
it's been shouted by maybe somebody in this house, but Marshawn Lloyd's a better bet to get drafted earlier.
But any running back other than those top four that Wright, Benson, Corum, and Brooks, any of those guys sneak into tonight, that's going to be huge for their dynasty outlooks.
So let's take a question in the YouTube chat. If you're at the 106 and you have the 112, assuming this is Superflex, and you have a need for tight end and wide receiver, do you target Bowers and a wide receiver at 12, or do you target a wide receiver at 6 and you take a tight end like a Ben Sinnott or a Tavian Sanders in the second or third round? I'm going to say if I had the 112, I would feel very good about my chances of having access to another wide receiver like you referenced, Ricky Pearsall. We're talking about Brian Thomas, potential for Ladd McConkey there. Keon Coleman could land well. I have a lot more outs at 112 where I could walk away with a tight end that I'm ecstatic about and a wide receiver that I feel like has a good shot of being a successful dynasty asset. Yeah. I think that's the way I'd handle it. Do either one of you have a different idea on that?
I think that if you're absolutely dead set on taking a tight end at some point in your rookie draft and you have these picks, 106 with Bowers is the way to go. There's such a big cliff between him and the rest of this tight end class. But I'm also one to advise away from locking into positional need. I think that's a way to limit yourself in terms of drafting, in terms of you don't need starters in April. You don't need starters on your dynasty roster in May. You want to accrue value and think about the best ways to maximize that. So I think it's just sometimes a little bit restricting to completely lock in and say, I need a tight end and a wide receiver out of these two picks.
I think Dario's correct. I think that you don't want to lock yourself into positional, painting yourself into a positional corner. You should take best player available. But this year, Brock Bowers is a perfect combination of immediate tight end production per your projections, a great prospect profile, one of the best tight end profiles of all time, and he's a great value at the 106. So I think that this year, that you can do it both ways in Brett's scenario. Josh?
Yeah, I'd say if your league is extremely active with trades and you know this, and someone like Neighbors is there at 106, I think you could consider it. But I think in general, the safest option here is that you take Bowers at 106, and you know that the receivers that are going to be there at like 110, 111, 112 are all kind of a flat tier. You're kind of getting Bowers in like the 110 or Bowers in the 111 in a way, in terms of none of us really know how that type of tier of receiver is going to shake out. All we know is that there's either going to be a late first round or early second round NFL draft capital receiver in a good landing spot there at the 112. So all else equal, I'm probably leaning Bowers 106 because the cliff is just massive at tight end. It's essentially Bowers, and then what are we dropping down like 5, 6, 7 tiers to get to the second guy?
Yeah, I wouldn't feel good drafting any other tight end.
I think
in
I'd
the
take
second
Bowers.
round.
We wouldn't feel great about it, but there's a couple guys that I think that we might feel a little bit better about this tight end class after tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Let's take this one question, and this is an interesting one. We feel like, I know, Dario, I'd say me and you are kind of in agreement here. Correct me if I'm wrong on Xavier Worthy being the 109 right now in Superflex.
Xavier Worthy. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
And Josh, you're putting Worthy. Your 109 is currently who?
Worthy. Yeah, it's Worthy, but I think he's in the tier with guys like Brian Thomas.
Okay, so
I still have him ahead, but I think
okay. So I'll take this.
And I think. I mean, I don't know. Have you read the question out loud yet? I know our YouTube viewers are seeing it.
No, I'm gonna change it a little bit. Okay. So you have Worthy at the 109. Worthy's at the 109 for us. Okay. The question Ben Peterson has is if Jonathan Brooks goes to the Dallas Cowboys, where does he fall in rookie drafts? Okay. So I'm going to say, does he pass Worthy? And would he be locked in at the 110 if he doesn't pass Worthy? Dario, you can kind of take that one.
I think he passes Worthy.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we have him, we have currently, our pre-draft rookie rankings. We have Trey Benson at 108, Blake Corum at 109. I think Brian Thomas at 106 is going to be the biggest faller.
I'd agree.
and Jonathan Brooks landing with the Cowboys. Obviously, the ACL tear is a concern in terms of his production, really this whole rookie season. But if he gets the draft capital being the first running back taken off the board, you have the Texas connection. I don't see why that couldn't be an offense where he provides consistent RB1 value in his early career.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I'll say this, I'll take it a two-pronged approach here. Because I had this conversation with Cody Carpentier earlier today and Matt Kelly. If Dallas makes that move up to get Jonathan Brooks, which there's a little bit of a rumor there that they're going to trade up to make sure that they get him, maybe jump the New York Giants, then I think that says a lot about Brooks to them, where would probably put Brooks right at the 109 and put Worthy at the 110. I would agree on that one. If they wait and they just take him at, down in like 57, then I'm going to have a little bit of a conversation. But I do think that 109, 110 would be really locked in. Josh Larky, your thoughts?
I think I'd still at least go Worthy here simply because better draft capital. I still think it's a better landing spot to be attached to Patrick Mahomes than, we like the Cowboys, but there's a little bit of uncertainty with Dak Prescott's contract. The offensive line's been aging a little bit. It's such an empty running back room that would it really shock us if they double tap running back in this draft? And I think the other thing we have to remember is that Jonathan Brooks is a slightly smaller running back who had 1 year in college to prove that he could handle a heavy workload, and he tore his ACL. I think people are forgetting that Jonathan Brooks has never made it through a healthy season at a high level as a running back healthy. And I think we should be concerned about that. It's not that I hate Brooks. I don't see how you take him over someone like Xavier Worthy, who was productive every year in college, is now playing with Patrick Mahomes. And Jonathan Brooks, some people are like, oh, like he reminds me of Tony Pollard. He can step into the Tony Pollard role. Tony Pollard really only had one awesome season for fantasy. None of those other years were awesome. I think we have to remember that most of the Tony Pollard experience was wish casting and being disappointed.
Guys, a comment from the chat that has my mind blown. Ben Peterson, one person who asked a couple questions, looks like Billy Muzio in a witness protection program. So is Ben Peterson maybe Billy Muzio undercover for him to get his questions answered today?
Yeah, how come Billy Muzio is not in the chat?
Listen, get in the chat, Billy Muzio. We hope you're doing well. Here is one from the Dynasty Warzone. Our own Memphis Young is in the chat. How high are you taking Brock Bowers in a 2.0 tight end premium? So the traditional tight end premium these days is usually a 1.5 point. Occasionally you see that 1.25 sicko league, but it's usually 1.5. And now this is a 2.0 tight end premium. For a 2.0 tight end premium, Josh, if we're getting a tight end 8 projection from the rookie fader and doubter and hater, Dario Offstein and Bradley Stalder, then I think that you need to start pushing Brock Bowers up into the 103 conversation in that sort of premium.
Yeah, I think you still have Caleb Williams 101.
And it's a start 2 tight end format, keep in mind.
And it's a start 2.
So I think, you've got Caleb Williams 101. I think Bowers is now in conversation for the 102. I think he joins that tier of Marvin Harrison Jr., Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors. I think it becomes essentially a big one. And then after that, after Caleb Williams, it becomes the next big 4. So I think if you took him at 102 in this format, I see Memphis smiling in the background. I think that's what he wants to do, and I wouldn't be able to talk someone out of that.
Well, anybody who listens to the Dynasty Warzone like I do, and you can check that out every Sunday evening on Player Profiler YouTube, has heard Memphis Young's enthusiasm for Brock Bowers, which he shares with me and Dario. Dario, you're now Team Brock Bowers, so we all love Brock Bowers. Very interesting, that 2.0 tight end premium, Dario. We rarely look at that sort of a premium scoring. That's heavy. You're talking about Travis Kelce in his top seasons is outscoring QB1 if it's a 4-point passing touchdown.
I think the point where I just like struggle with the Bowers dream scenario is Travis Kelce was only able to do what he's done over the course of his career because of Andy Reid, because of Patrick Mahomes, and Brock Bowers just got drafted to one of the most dysfunctional orgs in the league, period.
I think that's a fair take, But I think that them taking Brock Bowers at 13 overall, I look at these copycat type picks where I see New England sort of been tormented by Josh Allen for years, and now they do the kind of squint and, maybe we could do some of that Josh Allen stuff with Drake May. I think that the Las Vegas Raiders have a similar approach with Travis Kelce has murdered us for years. Now we have a chance to get a move tight end, certainly a different player than Travis Kelce. But in terms of if we had to pick a young tight end right now that could do what Travis Kelce has done in fantasy, we'd come up with about 3 names in the currently Dynasty, and one of them would be Brock Bowers. So
yeah,
I think stylistically they want to do that. And I also think that when you factor in the age of Devontae Adams, a player who's had 169 or more targets for 3 straight years, how many more years is he going to be there?
We're not allowed to compare Caleb Williams to Patrick Mahomes, right?
I'm allowed to. You're allowed to.
We shouldn't be allowed to compare any tight ends to Travis Kelce either.
Well,
call me crazy.
I was going to say, so question for you guys. Would you enjoy if your receiver in a PPR format had 228 receptions? Because Evan Engram had 114 catches last year. And in this format, that is like 228 receptions. I think with Bowers, we have to recognize that the upside's ridiculous given that scoring format. And
agreed.
I don't think we need to overthink it.
He doesn't need to be Kelce in his career path to pay off that pick in this format. I agree with that.
So we have one comment in the chat from James Stark. Benson, he likes more than Brooks. I love Trey Benson. Trey Benson's my RB1 right now. And Trey Benson is like plus 140 to go off the board as the first running back selected, Josh. So that we could also see Trey Benson. I think that's an interesting one. But I want to kick a question to Dario. Actually, let's start with Josh on this one, and then to you, Dario. One player who we haven't discussed, and before we even get into why they made the pick, let's discuss Michael Penix and how he should be valued in Superflex drafts, because I think this is one where dynasty managers are sort of going through mental gymnastics. You have the unbelievable top 10 draft capital, but then you factor in the fact that Atlanta paid Kirk Cousins an exorbitant amount of money, and Kirk Cousins was leading the NFL in touchdown passes before he went down last year. So playing at a high level, gets paid, and now we have Michael Penix Jr. at the 108. Now, the Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson pathway, those guys weren't drafted inside the top 10. So this one's a new ball game. It's a real question mark. Where would you take Michael Penix if we were drafting in your rookie draft right now?
I'm glad you asked me this. 3:30 a.m. My head's on the pillow. I'm falling asleep. This is the question that I was pondering. This is what kept me up. I think we should take what we saw from like the Jalen Hurts, the Jordan Loves, and give it similar, if not Doc Penix even more. And here's why I'd give him sort of that mid. I think he should be a mid-ish to late round 2 pick, even in Superflex. Yep. And here's why. So with Michael Penix, we have an older quarterback. He played 6 years in college. He has 2 ACL tears. He generally has not provided anything on the ground as a quarterback. I know he ran the 4.55 supposedly. However, when you look at his actual college stats, he was never running. And when we look at the situation, Kirk Cousins is essentially on a 2 to 3 year guaranteed deal, depending on how much money the Falcons potentially want to eat. I think there's a good chance Penix won't start for at least 2 seasons, which is why we should start to group him in with that group of quarterbacks to begin with, even though he has the 8th overall draft capital. If we look at the history of 8th overall picks for the Falcons, this is their 3rd straight pick 8 overall. They took wide receiver Drake London in 2022 and decided not to use him. Then they took Bijan Robinson last year and decided to give Tyler Algier more goal line and more red zone carries than him. Then they pay Kirk Cousins. Now they take Penix. I think this is clearly the most incompetent franchise. You're welcome, Panthers fans. You're off the hook. And I don't think we should trust that this guy's starting anytime soon. And then the quote from general manager Terry Fontenot was, if it takes 4 or 5 years for someone like Michael Penix to see the field, we must be doing something right at that position. They are playing the world's longest game of, unfortunately, we're going to have to pay Michael Penix real money before he ever sees the field, potentially in a best case scenario. I don't know what's going on there. This is the franchise that I trust the least. And if you're talking about a pure pocket passer where you're hoping for fantasy QB2 output in Superflex, I think mid to late second is actually perfectly fine. And we just ignore the draft capital and say the Falcons officially falconed once again.
Yeah.
Before you answer, I'll say that your pure pocket passer, that's what he showed in college, but the athletic traits are there for him to be a little bit more than that.
We said the same thing about Stroud.
But Justin Fields didn't scramble in college, guys.
So the thing is, Penix is a 6-year college player with 2 ACL tears. We have such a large sample of 6 seasons of him never scrambling in college. You think they're going to completely change his game? Since I think the reason that Penix stayed healthy those last couple of years, he had one of the lowest sack rates in college football history. He was getting sacked at like 1% of his dropbacks because he just stands there and fires the ball out quickly. I think the Falcons, if he ever starts games for them, would have to do the same thing.
So before you answer, call it a number. He's your 202, 203.
Oh no, like 205.
Okay, so 205.
Yeah.
Dario, take it as long as you want, and then give us your prediction.
I think I'm right there with Josh. I mean, I was looking at our Dynasty rankings right now, and if you look at our quarterbacks for Superflex, we had him at a 68 lifetime value before the draft. Some of the names ahead of him are Baker Mayfield, Will Levis, Matthew Stafford, Justin Fields. He's going to creep ahead of some of those guys, but are you comfortable pushing him ahead of, I mean, even Kirk Cousins in Dynasty right now? Who would you rather have between those two guys? And what are you getting for Kirk Cousins in a Superflex league?
I would be comfortable taking Michael Penix ahead of Kirk Cousins in Superflex simply because I think that Terry Fontenot is full of it. I think that the fact that they drafted this guy with inside the top 10 means that he's going to be on some sort of whether it's this year or next. I just don't think that this is a long-term plan for Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is going to be effective this year, but I think that next offseason, this is going to be we go to Michael Penix. You don't draft a guy inside the top 10 unless you plan on using him. And do I think that the pick was a boneheaded pick? Absolutely. But I do think that I will take him a little bit higher than you guys would. You're saying like the 205. I'm not ready to push him into the first round, but I think with his sort of tools, I'm willing to take him probably a little closer to the 202, especially if I need a quarterback. I was in a startup, Dario, and I took Michael Penix super late, well before this draft. Mm-hmm. With that draft capital, he absolutely gained considerable value. So
but he's clearly the QB6 for this class for rookie drafts.
I agree,
no doubt.
So let's also take it because one guy we haven't discussed. Dario, stay there. Yeah. Go with what is your take on Bo Nix? Because Bo Nix goes 12 overall, and unlike Michael Penix Jr., there's nothing's going to block him. Bo Nix will be the starter week 1. I would bet a considerable amount on that. Talking about a guy with 61 career starts, an older player, and they draft him 12 overall in an offense that sort of values that accurate quarterback that doesn't need to take shots. A Sean Payton offense, you've seen this plenty of years where it's those low ADOT looks. I think Bo Nix is a big winner.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not particularly bullish on Nix or Penix necessarily hitting in the NFL. I think this draft capital that they've gotten was a bit of a surprise. I mean, there was a reason that the over-under everywhere for the quarterbacks in the first round was 4.5. You could get a lot of juice to bet the over on 5.5. So I think the talent it still worries me for those guys. I mean, yeah, the draft capital is there, but we've seen Matt Jones go in a similar range to where Bo Nix was drafted last night. So I think, yeah, I'm drafting Bo Nix ahead of Michael Penix because he's going to start games for me this year in a super flex league. And he's probably going to get more rush attempts per game when both of them are on the field. But am I betting on, if I'm at, say, the 111 in my super flex league, am I banking on Bo Nix being a starting quarterback for my dynasty roster for the next 3 to 4 years? I don't think so.
So treat him as a short-term asset. I think is the best thing you said there. If you go into it thinking that you've got some long-term stability from him, I think that's a great way of putting it, Dario. If it's a 2-year window, I think that's safe. And I'll say that the one thing that kind of raises his floor and his fantasy expectations ahead of a guy like Mac Jones is what you said with the rushing upside. Yes. Like Bo Nix is an underrated, his mobility is underrated and his rushing production is underrated because Last year, it sort of took a step back, but if you go back to that 2022 season, he had 14 rushing touchdowns. Like, the guy's crafty around the goal line. He's effective in short yardage. Interesting pick. Josh, Bo Nix.
I think we should think about him in this couple-year window. He's got some mobility. He got the draft capital. I think the concern with getting too excited about Bo Nix is the thought experiment of, in 2 years, do we think any of these players, any of this coaching staff will be there?
Yeah.
It would not surprise me in the slightest unless Bo Nix is awesome. I don't think Sean Payton's there in 2 years. I don't think any of this staff is there in 2 years. And I think that's the concern with Nix, is that you want to hopefully get some. I think he's going to be a pretty prolific rusher for the quarterback position as a rookie, since the receiving core is pretty decimated. The offensive line's fine. It's not actually that good. And I don't know necessarily if this is the greatest fit with Sean Payton. I think he's going to be running around. I don't think the offensive scheme's going to look great. I think you bank a lot of fantasy points and you start to look at getting out in year 2 at some point.
Yeah, I think that, if you get 2 seasons of production from him that are somewhere between quarterback 16 and quarterback 20, and like mid-range QB2 fantasy seasons, and you drafted him at the 112 in your rookie draft, and then you're able to get out from underneath while there's still some expectation that he's a starter in the NFL, I think that's kind of the range of outcomes you're shooting for.
Shout out to Steve Gambino. I think it's the way I'm sitting, Steve. Let's take a couple more here. How high does JJ McCarthy go in Superflex? Let's say the average league. Let's go ahead and around the horn and guess where he goes in like FFPC, Superflex, tight end premium formats. Dario.
I think 107.
107. You know what? I think Dario nailed it. I think because of the Odunze landing spot, I think 107.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
There was a very interesting question in the chat. I lost it, but which player that's currently still available has the highest fantasy upside of any player available that's still on the board? And you can say a landing spot with it. Let's
fantasy upside as in like dynasty rookie drafts, or as in like absolute ceiling for their career, the rookie year?
Theo, I've got this. I've
hold on. Let's let Dario, you pick that, because that's a very interesting way of phrasing it.
I think if we're talking about like most fantasy points this rookie season, it's got to be one of the running backs, right?
Yeah.
Trey Benson lands in Dallas, wheels up. In terms of career production, I think A.D. Mitchell has one of the higher ranges of outcomes for the guys still on the board. There's a reason there was a first round hype for him. I mean, if A.D. Mitchell lands on the Chargers at pick 37 and is automatically tied to Justin Herbert for the foreseeable future, he could end up being the most valuable dynasty asset drafted that we see all day today. So those are my 2 names that come to mind.
I love that way of thinking about it, Dario. Take it away, Larky.
I've got 2. They both involve the Chargers. Lad McConkey to the Chargers. We have to go absolutely nuts with that landing spot. And then the other one that I haven't heard mentioned yet, that is quite realistic. When you look at the betting markets, Blake Corum going to the Chargers is the quote unquote favored pick. No, I don't think anyone knows where I'm going with this yet. He's the quote unquote favored pick, with the implied odds are like a 30% chance he goes there, which means he probably doesn't. I would love, with 2 franchise tackles with elite run blocking, we want the fastest player possible. You put Trey Benson in that Chargers offense.
Oh,
he can run for 1,500 plus yards the next couple seasons. That is the one that I think would make fantasy managers drool when they realize it's a run heavy coach with a guy that runs in the 4.3s. People comp him to J.K. Dobbins, to smaller Nick Chubb. It would
if Trey Benson is a Los Angeles Charger, he is Nick Chubb.
Yeah, the pants are off.
Literally, we might all be naked.
You said speed, and I thought you were going to go with Jalen Wright too.
Jalen Wright is
Wright's another one.
Okay, Wright, absolutely, and that Wright is a really interesting one. I'm glad you brought him up, Dario. 3rd round, Jalen Wright to the Dallas Cowboys. We are standing on our heads. We are literally standing on our heads. Hodo Prime, Steelers are talking about Adonai Mitchell. Yeah, and the Steelers have been connected to Adonai Mitchell. I think that's an interesting one. I'll say I agree with Dario, I think, and Josh on running back. One of the running backs is going to land really, really well. We see it every single year, sometimes to our own detriment, Dario. We remember the Trey Sermon landing spot. Like, we sometimes will make poor decisions based on running back landing spot, but I do think tonight we're going to get some good ones. I will say 37 overall. I will say I think that the Chargers are going to take another offensive lineman. They're just going to lean into it. Jackson Powers Johnson, like you have a bunch of these guys left.
JPJ still on the board.
JPJ still on the board.
Oh, linemen are weapons, Theo.
This is Harbaugh. Harbaugh's going to think, what would Bo have done? And he's going to take the 350 pounder. Guys, let's keep going with this. I have one question for you both. What is a player that you think will be drafted higher than maybe some are anticipating from the skill positions?
It's my Trojan. It's Marshawn Lloyd.
I love that.
Mhm.
Is there a landing spot you'd love to see for Marshawn Lloyd? I have one.
We've already talked about the Chargers. Let's hear yours.
I like Marshawn Lloyd landing in Arizona in the 3rd round, because I think with Marshawn Lloyd landing in that sort of contingent upside spot, I'll be able to get him in a lot of rookie drafts. And I think his pathway for taking over a 29-year-old James Conner's job would be there. And I'd be looking at year 2 Marshawn Lloyd with that sort of exceptional athletic ability, with that sort of receiving, projectable receiving ability in a James Conner role, now in an offense with Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Trey McBride. Marshawn Lloyd in the 3rd round, Arizona would be awesome.
I've got one more landing spot to add to that.
Go ahead.
I know Theo would be on board with this. Dario probably would as well. We've been talking about why we should sell James Cook. They do not like using him at the goal line.
Oh, yeah.
Put Marshawn Lloyd on the Bills. Preserve Josh Allen's body. Take James Cook out of a goal line role that he has no business handling. And I think we could be looking at 10 to 15 touchdowns in year 1 from Lloyd on the Bills.
Well, Josh, I know you read my Dynasty Landmines article, one of my favorite articles I write all year long. And James Cook is one of the biggest Dynasty Landmines.
Yes.
I think that could be the shock of tonight, that the Buffalo Bills, they have a 4th round pick. They don't have a 3rd round pick. So this would take a little bit of maneuvering. But if a running back,
they can keep trading down.
They could keep trading down, or they could slightly move up from the 4th round. Because like Dario brought up earlier, it seems like such a negligible difference. But 3rd round versus 4th round running back, last year and most years, about 80% of your RB1s were drafted on day 1 and day 2.
Yeah. Oh,
and some years it's 90%. So like for every Isaiah Pacheco, there's 6 guys who were like round 3 or round 2 guys. So we really want to see whatever your favorite running back is in this draft class, you want to see those guys go.
Yeah.
But I do think for a short-term loss, a 4th round running back could really hurt James Cook if it's the right one. James Cook could lose.
Kyron Williams is the guy we're worried about. Rashad White is the guy we're worried about making it through today and tomorrow.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of guys that could get their dynasty value nuked by drafting a Will Shipley, Braylon Allen, Dylan Laube, stealing your entire pass catching role.
It's interesting. Rashad White was not in my Dynasty Landmines one, but Kyron Williams certainly was. Rashad White probably should have been in there because last year, attached to Dave Canales, was sort of a perfect volume storm. And now you have, a potential change in philosophy offensively. He gets Graham Barton in the 1st round and they could go with a running back,
I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Ravens take a running back before round 5.
Josh, anything to add? We're over an hour in. Guys, we would love to keep doing this all day long, but we need to get set up for tonight. A reminder that this evening we're starting at 6:45 Eastern time. We're going to cover every single pick in the 2nd round, every single pick in the 3rd round. We have boots on the ground at the NFL draft. We're going to be bringing you the best fantasy football coverage that you can find anywhere for the NFL draft. Josh, take it away. Anything to add?
Yeah, one team we haven't talked about much, the Bengals. We look at their long-term plans. It's a Jamar Chase extension. That seems like that's kind of about it in the skill position group. I think we could see some kind of running backs landing there. We could see a receiver. We could even see a tight end landing there at pick 49 or pick 80. And if I know you really like Ben Sinnott, there's some very exciting tight ends where if they land with the Bengals, some people would try to talk themselves out of it because Burrow hasn't thrown to tight ends. Then you realize that he's never actually had a good tight end to throw to. So I think there's potential there for the Bengals where some guy gets steamed up pretty massively if it's tight end premium or just any receiver or running back landing in that spot.
Before you kind of give us a takeaway, let's take one more question because I thought this was a cool one in the chat. Let's say it's 1 quarterback leagues, tight end premium times 2, okay, sitting at the 104. assuming that Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Brock Bowers are gone in single QB formats, which way are you going at the 104? Sort of a Dunze-worthy running back one?
It's still a Dunze.
That's still a Dunze.
Like, I think that
Yes.
we don't overthink his profile. Keenan Allen is old. Only 1 year left on that deal. Like, I think that Odunze, sure, he didn't, like, would he get more targets in year one if he had been the one to go to the Giants? Absolutely. But as far as dynasty goes, he's going to be with Caleb Williams for life, hopefully.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a Dunze. I think that, like, if you get the draft capital matters significantly more than the current target competition with a player of like a Dunze.
Yeah.
Give a shout out to our friends at Dynasty Trades in 5 in the chat. I'm going to be on with those guys on Monday on theirs, and Scott Connor is going to be on Dynasty Life with me this week. So shout out to those guys. This was been a lot of fun. We're going to be back here in just a couple of hours. We're grinding here in the Roto Underworld. I hope you stick with us. You can watch our stream right here on Player Profiler YouTube. You can check us out on Player Profiler Twitter, and then you can watch it on replay on YouTube if you want to rewatch it. So guys, thanks a lot. Dario and I are going to be back doing another Reddit AMA sometime next week. And Dario, we're gonna have to talk about a lot of post-draft stuff.
It's gonna be the mother of all Reddit.
It's gonna
AMAs.
be. We might have to go 90 on that one, but today we're a little too jammed here in the Roto Underworld. So anyway, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the NFL draft. Day 2 is like the greatest dynasty day of the entire year. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.